Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jam Vishnupada Brahmsa Purvadakacharya Shotashata Srimad, His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jam Vishnupada Brahmsa Purvadakacharya Shotashata Srimad, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Nitai Gaur Pramanande Hari Hari Gaur. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4, entitled the Hamsa Guhya Prayers. Text number 45. Brahma Bhavo Bhavantascha Manavo Vibhudeshvara Vibhutayo Mamahi Eta Bhutanam Bhuti Hetava Brahma Bhavo Bhavantascha Manavo Vibhudeshvara Vibhutayo Mamahi Eta Bhutanam Bhuti Hetava Brahma Bhava Bhavantascha Manava Vibhudeshvara Vibhutayo Mamahi Eta Bhutanam Bhuti Hetava. Brahma, Lord Brahma. Bhava, Lord Shiva. Bhavanta, all of you Prajapatis. Cha, and Manava, the Manus. Vibhuda Ishvara, all the different demigods, such as the sun, the moon, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, who are all in charge of various activities for the welfare of the world. Vibhutaya, expansions of energy. Mama, my. He, indeed. Eta, all these. Bhutanam, of all the living entities. Bhuti, of welfare. Hetava, causes. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the Manus, all of the other demigods in the higher planetary systems, and you, Prajapatis, who are increasing the population, are working for the benefit of all living entities. Thus, you expansions of my marginal energy are incarnations of my various qualities. Purport. There are various types of incarnations or expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The expansions of his personal self, or Vishnu Tattva, are called Svamsha expansions, whereas the living entities, who are not Vishnu Tattva, but Jiva Tattva, are called Vibhinamsha, separated expansions. Although Prajapati Daksha is not on the same level as Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, he is compared to them because he engages in the service of the Lord. In the service of the personality of Godhead, it is not that Lord Brahma is considered very great, while an ordinary human being trying to preach the glories of the Lord is considered very low. There are no such distinctions. Regardless of whether materially high or materially low, anyone engaged in the service of the Lord is spiritually very dear to him. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya gives this quotation from the Tantra Nirnaya. Vishesha Vyakti Patratvad Brahmadhyastu Vibhutaya Tad Antaryaminash Chaiva Matsyadya Vibhava Smrta. From Lord Brahma down, all of the living entities engaged in the service of the Lord are extraordinary and are called Vibhuti. As the Lord says in Bhagavad Gita, Yadyad Vibhutam Sattvam Srimad Urjitam Eva Va Tatadeva Vagachatvam Mama Tejo Msha Sambhavam. Know that all beautiful, glorious, and mighty creations spring from but a spark of my splendor. A living entity, especially empowered to act on behalf of the Lord, is called Vibhuti, whereas the Vishnu Tattva incarnations of the Lord, such as the Matsya avatar, Keshavadirtha Mina Sharira Jaya Jagadisha Hare, are called Vibhava. Om Ganachamandasya Ganajana Shlakaya Chakshmatamana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we are continuing with the Hamsa Guhya prayers, as we have been reading for a bit now. And the Lord is saying that the various controllers of the material world, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Manus, demigods, Prajapatis, are all sparks of his splendor, as the verse in the Bhagavad Gita says, that they are all expansions of his marginal energy. We, of course, are taught that the Lord has three categories of potencies, which is his internal or superior energy, which is called the spiritual energy, which is fully manifest in the spiritual world in Vaikuntha. And then there is the inferior or external energy, which is the material energy, which is manifest throughout the material world. And then there is the marginal energy, which are the living entities that are sometimes working with the internal energy, the spiritual energy, and sometimes working with the external or material energy. And this viewpoint offers a very different sort of worldview than what is generally accepted among the populace, or among people in general, in several ways. One is, of course, as I've talked about before, regarding universal origins, in that Krishna is saying that everything that is, beautiful, glorious, mighty, etc., are coming from him. Which of course, I think, the cosmos would fall into that category. And the way, so basically what this is saying is that the foundation of existence is personal. This is, of course, opposed to the generally impersonal viewpoints that are prevalent, not just by the traditional Mayavad schools, but also more generally today in various other schools as well. Whether that's the kind of cheaply Mayavad, as in like the new agey sort of everything's one man sort of viewpoint, or the more what you could call hard-headed scientific viewpoint. Both say that the ultimate reality or the ultimate cause of the universe is impersonal. While the Bhagavatam view, the Krishna conscious view, is that ultimately the origin of the universe is personal. And it is actually personal at every level. There's, of course, the ultimate cause, which is Krishna, but also there is his expansion, that is the intermediate cause, which is Mahavishnu. Mahavishnu is lying on the causal ocean, and by his breathing is manifesting and unmanifesting the material world. And then one step further, there is Lord Shiva, who is in one sense, the head of the entire material creation. He sits in this sort of in-between space between the material and the spiritual world, since he is the expansion of Krishna that is in touch with material energy. So he's kind of the overall manager of all the material universe or material worlds. And then within a particular universe, there is Lord Brahma. And then under him, there are various demigods and Prajapatis and Manus and all sorts of administrative positions. So from the very top to really the very bottom, so to speak, everything is personal. There are people in charge, as opposed to impersonal laws that nobody knows where they came from. Nobody knows where the material that they are describing came from. They're just sort of there. Sometimes you do hear people recourse to the laws of physics to explain certain things. Basically saying that, sometimes they even offer mathematical arguments as proof of physical things. This is very common, especially among theoretical physicists. present companies sometimes included, that we kind of get so caught up in the laws, these various mathematical expressions, that we end up thinking that the universe is that which obeys the laws in physics textbooks. But of course, if one thinks about it a bit more philosophically, one will recognize that one can, of course, make mathematics for anything. But depending on your viewpoint, mathematics does not really have a substance, so to speak. It kind of just exists in the mind. So one needs something to, as Stephen Hawking one time put it, breathe fire into the equations in order to make them actually apply to something. I don't know what exactly Stephen Hawking, who was famously an atheist, thought was actually doing that, but the kind of Bhagavatam viewpoint is that the various personalities in charge of the material world are responsible for making sure that it goes on in a regulated way. And there are various ways that they do that, various levels of administration. Because Krishna himself does not bother so much with the individual running of each material universe. He kind of delegates that to the various personalities who do it. Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the demigods, even the planets, as it is alluded to in the word for word, the sun, moon, Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, as well, of course, as Saturn, Rahu, and Ketu, are all controllers of the material world. And additionally, the way that the living entities are populated into the world is also a very personal way and is different than the kind of accepted way that, or kind of the way that is accepted by the modern intellectual, if you want to call them that, or the way that it is taught in the modern world. In the Bhagavatam view, the progenitors of mankind and all species are the Prajapatis, who are personalities, very elevated souls, who were given the task of increasing the population. The modern viewpoint is, of course, that the variety and the proliferation of the living entities is due to evolutionary theory, which is, of course, more impersonal aspect, but is very different than the Bhagavatam viewpoint. The major difference, as one can immediately see, is that the Bhagavatam viewpoint starts with very elevated personalities and then goes to kind of everybody else. And that the Prajapatis were given that position because of their pious activities in previous lives, and were given the duty of populating the universe. While in the modern materialistic viewpoint, the origin of life, people don't really know, actually. But, they have different viewpoints. I heard growing up a lot the idea of the primordial soup, in which there was, a lot of chemicals floating around, and then it was struck by lightning or something. And it's made the chemicals give them enough energy to bind in a certain way, and then suddenly you have life. I know, once again, when I was going through school, there was an experiment, the Miller-Urey experiment, in which these two scientists, Miller and Urey, purported under conditions that were similar to, or supposedly similar to early Earth, or like early life conditions. They were able to make certain amino acids, so certain proteins that are vital for the functioning of more complicated forms of life. And this was proclaimed as, oh, this is great proof that life came from matter, that life can come from non-life. Of course, if one looks actually closer at the experiment, one sees that that isn't actually the case. In that the Miller-Urey experiment, one, we later figured out, did not actually mimic the conditions on early Earth. So they weren't even looking at the correct environment that could have given them something, or that would actually be equivalent to the what was actually occurring on Earth. And secondly, they only produced, if I recall correctly, left-handed amino acids. So amino acids have some what is called chirality, in that some of them are mirror images of each other. And if I recall correctly, biology is not my main field. Most amino acids used for life are actually right-handed. There are some that are needed both right-handed and left-handed, but for the most part, the Miller and Urey got all left-handed, while you need actually mostly right-handed. But still, this was touted for many, many years as conclusive proof that life can come from matter. And it's not like, the flaws were discovered recently. I'm pretty sure that the flaws were discovered at least 10 or 20 years before I was in school. So hopefully they aren't still teaching it. And I haven't heard it recently, so I think people finally caught on about Miller and Urey. But but there's still a lot of what one could call misinformation or bad science even in origins of life research. There's a lot of detail to get into if one is interested in these things. One could look up the talks of the scientist named James Tour. And he's a synthetic chemist by training. And he takes real issue with origins of life research and the state of it. He does a lot with the Discovery Institute, which is the Christian version of the BI. And yeah, his big thing is pointing out the flaws in origins of life research. One of the points that he makes is that the chances of these things actually happening are so incredibly small, in that for them to have a remote chance of really happening, the Earth would have to be billions and billions and billions and billions of years old. And a similar argument has been made by many people, including Sataputsa Prabhu, in regards to evolution. In that to even get a simple transition, Sataputsa Prabhu actually gave a talk where he was talking about this to a group of biologists, where he showed a simple example of bacteria or something, where just one change in the genetic code, what are the chances of that happening in a way that would actually allow the bacteria, I think it was the specific case he was talking about, to actually survive? Because you actually need many times a lot of different changes to happen simultaneously. This is usually referred to as irreducible complexity, in that living systems tend to be interdependent. The various parts tend to be interdependent upon each other. A classic example is venomous snakes, in that you can't have venom without a venom pouch. So snakes have a certain pouch in their mouth or their jaw that stores their venom. If the venom pouch wasn't there, then the snake would die. But without the venom, there is no need for a venom pouch. It's just empty energy that's being maintained there. So that's kind of a classic example of this idea of irreducible complexity, in that if there's actually going to be a change, a lot would have to happen at the same time. And Sadhaputta Prabhu showed that even in a simple example of bacteria, much less snakes and humans and everything like that, there would be the chances of it happening randomly are extremely low. Moreover, the simple idea, one could say, of evolution, kind of the Darwinianism that most people are familiar with, is kind of known to be inadequate uh, and at the very least incomplete. Once again, talking about Sadhuputsa Prabhu, who is, of course, by training a mathematical biologist. He one time said that actually any mathematician who looks at evolution as a mathematical problem knows that it's completely bogus, that it just doesn't make sense mathematically. And somebody asked him after he said that, so if that's true, why don't more people say it? And his kind of humorous answer was that it would make the biologists too angry at us, and that biologists are very invested in evolutionary theory. However, even the biologists have had to admit that there are some issues with evolutionary theory, and that there are actually more and more phenomenon that can't be explained by evolutionary theory. So what they do is they make what's called a synthesis. So, first there was Darwinism, and then there was things that couldn't be explained. And it's like, okay, so we'll bring in embryology and genetics and things like that and make the new evolutionary synthesis. I might have the order wrong, but the basic history is there. And then there are more and more things that couldn't be explained by that, which then people said, okay, we'll make the modern synthesis. But now they're finding even more and more things that can't be explained by that. So they're thinking of making a new synthesis of even more things. But always without questioning the underlying assumption of evolution by natural selection. Say, okay, we'll add more things like ideas from embryology and molecular biology and things like that, niche construction thing, and etc. But never attacking the actual foundation. And then, of course, evidence, which completely destroys the foundation, or the idea in general, such as anomalous archaeological finds, as is most thoroughly explained or outlined in Forbidden Archaeology. Evidence such as that is just completely ignored, because it could completely defeat the theory, and it does completely defeat the theory. But people don't want to give it up. So they just hold on to it. The Bhagavatam viewpoint is, of course, that humans, or human-like beings, were around since the very beginning in the Prajapatis, who increased population, and there's a hierarchy of personality from the highest to the lowest. Everything is personal. Then the next natural question is kind of, what are all of these persons doing? Or what should they do? Of course, we are answered in the purport that we are supposed to engage in the service of the Lord. This idea or explanation of there being higher personalities might make one I'm really envious in that we tend to want to be the controller and the enjoyer, which is why we're in the material world in the first place. So when we hear that, oh, there's Lord Brahma, there's Lord Shiva, there's the Devatas, Manus, etc., we might think, oh, they're so high and we are so low. But actually, as is explained in the purport, the actual way to become great is to engage in the service of the Lord, in which there is no distinction. Anybody from Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva to the lowest living entity can engage in the service of the Lord and be elevated to the spiritual world, even bypassing the position of even Lord Brahma, who is in the material world, back to the spiritual world. So we should take advantage of this opportunity and all engage ourselves in the service of the Lord. Of course, I should clarify that we are not overtaking Lord Brahma. He is, of course, the head of our sampradaya, and goes back to Godhead at the end of the universe. But one can get an even better position in that any position in the spiritual world is more advantageous or better for us than any position in the material world. So I'll stop here. I feel like I've been rambling some, but hopefully somebody got something out of it. Any comments, questions, additions, subtractions, multiplications, divisions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Bible.
I really appreciate your classes, but I think it's hard to comment or even ask a question because some of your presentations get to be so technical. It's just hard to compose a related thought for the uninitiated, for those of us who lack your background. It's just it becomes a huge leap. I have one thing that I was looking for some clarification on.
Mm-hmm.
And my own understanding of amino acids and proteins is severely lacking. But my understanding is that the Miller array produced a mix, an equal mix of left and right-handed amino acids, and the problem that was identified was that living matter on Earth uses only left-handed amino acids.
Yeah, I might have gotten the details a bit wrong. It's been a while since I've looked at it, but yeah, the general argument is that they produced things that don't actually, the acids profile that they produced doesn't actually correspond to life.
Yeah, there were many problems
Hmm.
identified with the results of their experiments. The conditions that they set up were later determined to be actually quite different from what
Yeah.
might have existed in the past, and many other problems. But the idea still persists. I think you can still find it in a lot of textbooks, but it's certainly ingrained in society. A lot of people think that that experiment pretty much established uh, at least the likelihood that life began in that sort of a way. Um, and it probably will persist for some time. That experiment also produced byproducts that were powerfully toxic substances. It would have um, made it quite difficult for the development of any sort of living organism.
Yeah.
Well, one of which was hydrogen cyanide
Hmm.
and
Uh,
formaldehyde. So, um, yeah, there's a lot of problems with that.
yeah, and that the scientist that I mentioned, James Tour, he talks about kind of that issue, and that what goes on in origins of life research, is people work out a possible chemical pathway, uh, and then if they mess up or something gets produced that's wrong or toxic, uh, they just look through their lab notebook and see where they might have messed up, and then they throw away what they messed up and then start over. The point that Dr. Tor makes is that nature can't just throw things away, and that if you mess up, or if nature messes up in the chemical pathway to life, it doesn't just have a place where you can go take the beaker and pour it out. uh it's stuck with it, with the hydrogen cyanide and formaldehyde and everything. uh so yeah, that point has been made by people, in that once nature, undirected nature, makes something, that's stuck with it, and the proto life, so to speak, that is coming later has to deal with it.
And one of the other big problems um, with the idea that this was a possible origin for life is that it did not demonstrate the production of any sort of nucleotides,
Mhm.
which would be necessary for RNA and DNA, and
Yeah.
um, so only very, very simple um, organic molecules, but nothing complex enough to create any sort of a clear pathway to actually even a single living cell, and what to speak of a cell membrane and all of the complexity necessary for life to exist. It's all a very, very big stretch.
Mhm.
But I get, for those who I guess don't that lack the background in biology to be able to understand how it's such a great leap. Um, it
Yeah.
it makes sense, I guess, but it really falls very far short.
Thank you, Prabhu. It looks like Agari Krishna has his hand
All
up.
right, Krish.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for a technical class. This is the fodder for my brain.
Thank you.
So on the point that Prabhupada makes in the purport on the equality of living entities,
Yeah.
Vibhuti, that because everybody is engaged in the service of the Lord, there's no such distinction between high and low.
Mhm.
Would you say that another proof um, that of this equality in the Brahma Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, that although Brahma is the head of the Sampradaya, and he goes back to Godhead at the end of his lifetime, which is very long, 311 trillion years. A denizen of Kali Yuga like myself, who's not as pious as Brahma, can in one lifetime go before Brahma back to the spiritual world due to the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So would you say that's yet another proof of how the Lord demonstrates this equality to all his parts and parcels?
Yeah, I would say that it, is another proof, because he is coming to every living entity at the level at which they can interact with him. Lord Brahma is, of course, a very elevated personality. So the Lord comes to Lord Brahma in a very elevated way. Of course, the Lord is always elevated. And we are very unelevated denizens of Kali Yuga. And the Lord still comes to us in a way that we can understand, specifically as Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda, to give us the process that we can actually follow. Because actually any living entity can go back to Godhead, even in one lifetime. But the process by which they do it might be different, depending on their position and their qualities, etc. Of course, anybody on any planet can chant Hare Krishna, but not everybody takes it up, even in previous yugas. They viewed it as too easy, while the Lord, being very merciful to us, knew that we needed a very easy process, because otherwise we wouldn't do it. Okay, are there any other comments, questions in the last few minutes? Okay, if not, Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Thank you.
Thanks.